Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, mine alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to what is now the most important game of the year for K-State, or it should be. You know, who knows what will happen with tiebreakers. Here's how Bernie can still win. Here's how K-State can still get in the Big 12 championship. But here's the most important game of the year for K-State, and it's up against, of course, the in-state rival Kansas Jayhawks in the Sunflower Showdown. And I don't see any reason to sort of belabor the point. We can just dive right in to the scouting report because everyone knows what's on the line, or at least everyone who's listening to this show fully recognizes what is on the line in this game, because 17 straight is on the line, and also the well-being of both of our mental health is on the line.
Yes, the mental well-being would certainly, I think, be hurt even worse if we were having the year we were supposed to be. But there would be, despite how haphazard this year has been. There's still going to be some mental fallout if we lose this game, no matter what, because it always hurts to lose, period, but it especially hurts to lose to your rival in any context.
Yeah, though I will say I'd rather lose in a year where basically nothing's on the line, but let's not get to that point.
Yeah. That's pride on the line, but really not a lot material, unfortunately. At least at this point in the year, it's looking like it'll be the difference between the Rate Bowl and the Texas Bowl, which I suppose is baseball stadium versus football stadium. So there's that, but
sure,
I can't really make a more convincing argument.
Yeah,
beyond
we don't get sent to the Liberty Bowl.
Yeah, other non-tangible things like pride. I can't. There's no other real or personal property argument to be made here. Well, the Governor's Cup, that's personal property of the victor. So,
but anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
The KU enters with a similar record, though reversed, so palindroming. KU enters at 4-3 in this game, with the three losses coming against, pretty good teams, Mizzou, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech, and there being only one blowout against them in Texas Tech. But I want everyone who's listened to the show knows that I'm a verified hater. Me and Connor's dad are in competition for who is the biggest respected hater, specifically for KU. But I do want to put the asterisks that they beat Fresno State, who's one of the worst FBS schools, Wagner, who's a not good FCS school, West Virginia, who's probably the worst Power 4 school right now, and barely scraped by a okay UCF team in Orlando, and then lost to a Mizzou squad that almost probably should have lost to Auburn, lost to a Cincinnati squad that, although they are first in the Big 12, I don't have a good explanation for how they are there, and then got absolutely decimated by Texas Tech. So this isn't even one of those teams where you look at their record and it makes a whole lot of sense. Their wins make sense, but again, they're just a very variable team, I suppose, is the way to put it.
Yeah. It was supposed to be a rebuilding year for KU, but they kind of started out looking better, but I think a lot of that was maybe a bit of a mirage just because of the quality of competition they were facing. As that competition quality is up, we've seen a blowout loss to a team that's obviously better than them, and B, also some returns to form from last year, like the Cincinnati game, blowing a game that they absolutely should have won. If it happens once, twice, even three times, that's just horrible luck. But eventually it's a bit of a pattern, almost kind of like K-State one-possession games. Like these are two teams that have the last couple years in particular been not very good in close games, which some of K-State's only successes in close games the last couple years have been against KU. And both times have been with KU kind of having the upper hand for most of the game. So I'll be curious to see how those trends continue to work out. I mean, I probably won't be consciously thinking about that at all during the game. But, hindsight after the game, that'll be something interesting to think about is some of those trends.
Yeah. Anyway, now I think we can dig into their stats and their sort of biggest schematic calling card.
Yep. So we will start out with their offensive stats. So broadly, and some of the raw stats, they're 44th in yards per game and 46th in scoring, both of which are pretty decent numbers. However, they're absolutely abysmal on third down, 123rd in the nation in third down conversion percentage. They're only converting 1 out of every 3 of their third downs. You ideally want to have that number to be an average team, probably around 40%. They're well below that right now. So a tough spot for them. And also in the red zone, they're almost as bad. 117th in red zone scoring, scoring only 76% of the time they're in the red zone. And of those scores, only 59% of them are touchdowns. So as a consequence, they really rely on big plays pretty heavily. So that does explain their yards per play being fairly high, actually, at 31st. And it's obvious when you watch them as well that that's something that they excel at, is drawing up big plays with lots of space available on the field. Their offense is not really built to be constricted very well.
No, they're not. And that is basically their scheme, is they don't want you to sort of put them in a proverbial box, and they definitely want you to force you into playing a certain type of coverage.
Yes. They love, just like they did early in the Leipold era when Andy Kotelnicki was their offensive coordinator, they love to use motion and bunch sets, particularly motion, a calling card from Mr. Kotelnicki. Some of you may recall one of his quotes about his offense that I love, and I recited to Ace before the episode, is that his offense really isn't that complicated. It's just like a Dairy Queen Blizzard. It's vanilla ice cream and your favorite candy mixed in. So he really boils it down like that, but it's a lot of eye candy. It's basically what he's getting at there. They motion at one of the very top rates in the entire country, and they've started to use more condensed receiver formations in order to get some of their favorite passing concepts. And this has a few effects, but one of the biggest ones is that it forces most teams out of man coverage and forces them to play either match or zone, which are much easier to exploit from a passing game perspective.
Yeah, and when we say condensed receiver formations, that doesn't necessarily mean that the receivers are closer to the offensive line. It means that the receivers are closer to each other. So they're going to make you try to defend switch releases, which you're going to have one guy run behind another, and then you're just going to have to figure it out from there. But they want to get you into zone coverages, and a lot of that has to do with who their quarterback is, which I feel like, especially in K-State communities, given that Jalen Daniels has been here since, I don't know, the book of Exodus, he's like, it's a polarizing topic, but it's something that we'll talk about when we talk about Jalen Daniels in particular. But just know that this offense does have an understanding of what works for them, and they have a defined identity, which is something that they kind of lacked last year under the current Wisconsin offensive coordinator, who's been shut out for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, that was a head scratching hire at the time. Uh, I really don't know what else to say about it other than that was really out of character for them. And I was happy they did it because it made them a much worse team. But despite that brief aside, they're a pretty balanced team. They run it slightly more than they pass it at 52% in favor of the run.
Yeah. And reason for that?
They're one of the very few teams left in the country that I think you could call a pro style offense, though that's really more personnel. They run a lot of pistol with two tight ends, so that makes them a rare team where the traditional base defenses are actually kind of the preferred option. And this also means that they're not too limited in the running game either, and they run both power and zone schemes.
Yeah, they have a lot of two tight end stuff that they do, and there are three, arguably four tight ends. Well, I think it is four tight ends that they get on the field. Really, two of them are blockers and two of them are receivers. But point still stands. They're going to use their tight ends to block a lot, and they are true blocking tight ends that you see from those more traditional pro style offenses where establishing the run is the biggest priority of the offense because of how it sets up the play action game, which I believe is a pretty significant portion of their offense. In fact, seeing it now, yeah, it is.
Yeah, almost 42% of their passing plays are run off of play action, which they really need to do it because their offensive line needs help from that. They've ranged from being serviceable to pretty horrendous, with the horrendous moniker mostly reserved for their tackles. Jalen Daniels has been sacked 13 times this year in 7 games, which isn't entirely horrific, but he's getting pressured on 38% of his dropbacks. It is noteworthy that a lot of those sacks did come in the Texas Tech game.
8 of them.
Yeah, 8 of them. Which, to be fair, Texas Tech is doing that to just about everybody this year. But Jalen Daniels, regardless, still getting a lot of pressure. At 38% doesn't come just from one game.
No, and he does a very, very good job of sort of avoiding that pressure. And I feel like there's no better transition to talking about Jalen Daniels with the notable offensive players than that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows his name at this point if you're a K-State fan. We've seen him every single season since the COVID year, which is just absolutely crazy to say. He's played in every game, even though he was not in 2021 the full-time starter. He came in for Jason Bean when he got injured. So it was I think he was actually third string that game. It was Bean and somebody else who I cannot remember, and then Jalen Daniels. But he's played in the Sunflower Showdown a ton, yet to win. So obviously going to be a personal game for him because he doesn't want to go out winless against K-State. But for Jalen Daniels, it does turn out that Jeff Grimes really was the problem with him. He's been hyper efficient this year, just like he had been in 22 and 23. And he's really done a great job this year taking care of the football while still making good plays with his arm. He's still, in terms of pure strength, probably has a bottom 5 arm in the entire conference. He makes up for it by being a very good runner and someone who generally will make solid enough decisions. In other words, he plays an excellent point guard. If one were to pick at another part of his game, it's that he's not necessarily the greatest at getting the ball out very quickly, which is weird given how efficient he is. He nearly takes a full 3 seconds to get the ball out on average, which is half a second slower than almost anyone we face this year. Granted, he's better at extending the play than anyone we face this year. If you're looking for where he ranks in the grand scheme of the conference, he's firmly in the Noah Fafita tier, which is a tier or 2 below your Sawyer Robertsons and your Josh Hoovers. But yeah, very efficient, doesn't turn over much, but typically, I guess, one note when he does turn it over, it always seems to be a huge moment. He does.
And they come in bunches.
Yeah, he really is a when it rains it pours type of quarterback. Kind of streaky in that sense, but the streaks of good are typically really long. He can go a long time without making major mistakes, but when they start rolling, they really roll.
Yeah. And this is where I think the Jalen Daniels conversation this is where it links back to the offense. That Jalen Daniels, the quarterback that is allowed to pick apart zone coverages and is allowed to read the field in front of him, that's a big reason why the motion is so great for Jalen Daniels in particular, because he's getting the answers before the test, basically. Because it's a full formation motion. Everyone is moving on just about every single play that they run. So he's getting as much information as possible so that he knows where to throw it if it is a zone coverage. He's excellent against zone coverage. I will give him that. And he's a really solid playmaker when he's out on the run. Even though he's not particularly fast, he's very elusive, and he's able to extend the play in a very solid fashion. So what's the problem with Jalen Daniels? Well, the old adage is you beat zone coverage with your brain and you beat man coverage with your arm. Jalen Daniels is not a good man coverage quarterback, which is strange considering his ability to extend plays and his general athleticism. You generally associate that with an ability to beat man coverage. But if a team is playing tight man coverage and isn't giving him a lot of open space to throw to, he's not going to be able to make those really tight contested bullet throws. He's going to be much better at lofting those throws and getting his receivers out in space. And I think that is a very big reason why this team has been so bad on third down this year. Because once you get to those third down situations, you're going to get a lot more of those man coverages. You're going to get blitzed a lot more. And playing that man coverage takes away one of the biggest parts of Jalen Daniels' game, especially considering that he lost Luke Grimm, who full disclosure, I thought he was one of the most underrated receivers in the conference these last few years, especially in contested catch situations. And he's lost that immediate answer. So all in all, Jalen Daniels is an incredibly intelligent quarterback who just doesn't have the physical gifts in his arm to sort of ascend to that next tier. And there are ways to, like, if you're willing to play a lot of man coverage, yeah, there's a good chance that you are going to be able to not fully contain him, but at least limit his production.
Yeah. There's plenty of ways to hinder Jalen Daniels. Like a lot of quarterbacks, way worse under pressure. I'm looking at some PFF numbers right now from the Texas Tech game, pressure stats, which are very funny to look at for any team that Tech plays. Tech only blitzed on 24.4% of Jalen Daniels' dropbacks, but Jalen Daniels was under pressure in that game 51.1% of the time.
Oh, yeah.
So his PFF grade dropped 34.5 points from kept clean to under pressure. Kept clean, he had an 86.6 grade. Under pressure, a 52.1 with a turnover-worthy play. So, again, as much as I like to make fun of KU, can't really blame the guy, honestly. No. That's a very reasonable reaction to being faced with the terrifying defense that Texas Tech has, specifically their defensive front.
Yeah, because I think they're they're graded as either the best pass rush in the country or one of them.
They're without a doubt way up there, and they deserve it because, I mean, sure, they're a bunch of mercenaries, but that doesn't mean they aren't really good. So
we're going to die. Anyway, next notable player for KU.
yeah, I'm terrified. But LeSean Williams, a running back, is the next guy. He's an Iowa transfer. Iowa typically pretty good running back school, but he's a sturdy back. He consistently falls forward after contact, but has really struggled outside of that level of consistency. He struggled with consistency in terms of production. Outside of a pretty good game against West Virginia, he is yet to eclipse 70 yards in a game, and that's despite taking a pretty significant majority of the carries.
Yeah, because the other running back is Daniel Highshaw Jr., who I feel like has sort of gotten the raw end of the deal in these last few previews because he sat behind Devin Neal and now isn't the leading running back. It's LeSean Williams. But LeSean Williams, he just isn't a consistent running back. And I think that a lot of that just kind of comes down to vision. Whereas Daniel Highshaw basically has the same problem. And Devin Neal's elite trait was vision. So it's an adjustment for sure. And he doesn't lead the team in carries. That would be Jalen Daniels, who has 65 on the year.
Yeah, he does have 110 more yards, of course, but Jalen Daniels has lost 123 yards to sacks, which college football, I don't know why we're still counting sack yardage against rushing totals. But it's a
continuing choice, and it's a choice that I don't care for.
Yeah, it definitely skews the numbers, if nothing else. But yeah, I guess that takes us to the last notable offensive player that we are going to talk about, and that's Emmanuel Henderson. Possibly a familiar name for K-State fans who follow recruiting closely. He's a guy we were after in the portal, but he wears number 1 for KU, and he's one of 2 receivers that they have with more than 20 catches on the year. The other of those being Cam Pickett. And as well as being a transfer from Alabama, he's perhaps the biggest boom or bust receiver that we have faced this year. His deep speed is fantastic, and he has pretty decent size as well, 6'1", but he's been very inconsistent this year. He's exploded for 130 yards or more 2 times already this year, but he's had multiple games where he is barely scraped above 30 yards. Part of that is that his hands are not the best. He's dropped nearly 12% of his targets this year, and the last couple of weeks has been especially bad.
Yeah. And for the record, his receiving splits have gone 3 for 24, 6 for 130 with a long of 62, 3 for 29, 6 for 38 against West Virginia, 5 for 214 with a long of 93 up against Cincinnati, and then 5 for 53 for long of 24, and then 3 for 42, long of 19 against Texas Tech. So he's had 2 exceptional games, and then has just kind of been average. And you take into account the drop problem that he's had, he probably drops a little bit below average. But he's still someone that you have to account for because he's almost certainly their most dangerous offensive weapon. No one else on this offense really strikes fear into the other side. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to how their offense operates. They're going to get a lot of zone coverages because they want to get guys open without, they don't trust themselves to win those one-on-one matchups, with the exception of maybe Emmanuel Henderson on deep routes. But yeah, there's no one on this offense that really strikes a ton of fear into the other side, but they make up for it with really solid scheming. I also want to point out that there are times that Cole Ballard has played this year, but it's mostly in quarterback rushing situations, presumably on quarterback power, because Jalen Daniels has been injury prone in his career. So they want to take some of that stress off of him. Which, granted, 65 carries, they're not doing the greatest job of it, but it's there.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. And of course, these last few years when we've been playing KU, they've really thrown the kitchen sink at us. So definitely something that we're going to want to keep an eye on. Wouldn't be surprised if they're putting 3 quarterbacks on the field now. Isaiah Marshall is their kind of young recruit that they've been high on, although he's still behind Ballard right now. But it's definitely look for a ton of trick plays on offense, a little extra from their Dairy Queen Blizzard offense. I always worry when we face this offense when it comes time for the Sunflower Showdown, because with all of the motion they do and all the trick plays and the tendencies of our defense, they're basically guaranteed at least 1 or 2 major chunk plays, no matter how disciplined we play relative to our norms.
It's bound to happen. And, of course, we can get to the old stereotype of special teams plays as well. But now we can talk more about their defensive system, which just to get out ahead of it, yes, they run pretty much the same hybrid defense everyone does, with the exception of sometimes they walk up an extra linebacker, which makes them more similar to UCF than anyone else that we've played. But scheme is nothing we haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's kind of been the next evolution of this 3-3-5. Everyone's gone antsy and has started going back to a 4-man front because 3 just is not enough anymore. But statistically on defense, they really don't grade out as a fantastic unit on the year. 98th in yards per game allowed, 63rd in points, decent on third down, and 51st, giving up 36% of their third downs, but they are 125th in red zone percentage, although they've only given up touchdowns on 54% of those possessions. So sort of bend, don't break. The don't break just comes especially late in the process, to the point where they're almost certainly giving up points, but 3 is fewer than 6. But another note on their stats, they're horrid at defending the run. They are 118th in the country, giving up 188 yards per game.
Yeah, that's where this defense sort of falls apart. And it's sort of how they play the run too. That's super strange. And they've played the run pretty much the same way in this year, where everyone is going to pinch and then good luck everyone else. If you want to make a tackle, have fun, because if you're a linebacker in this particular type of defensive structure, the old adage for linebackers going for tackles is sift through the trash. So you have to find a way to find the hole while reading the running back and making sure that you're not the one getting blocked. The trash is everything with how their defensive line in particular plays up against the run, because they're all going to pinch inside. Their hybrid edge player is going to pinch inside, which you think, oh, that means that you can't run up the middle. Nope, that is not what that means. It just means that the gaps get slightly smaller, which, that makes it slightly more difficult for the running back. But it also means that if there is a gap, the linebacker's not going to see it. So it's a very much their rush defense has very much been, yep, everyone is going to do the exact same thing every time, and it's good luck to the linebackers, which is not how you play against the run. And this is the best argument that I have ever seen to people who think that just by virtue of having more people on the line of scrimmage, that makes you a better run defense. No, that's not what that means. That's not what that means.
But Ace, more people big on line, good.
In some context, yes, but not against the run.
Fair enough. I think that probably warrants a classic Ace Edwards YouTube breakdown at some point.
Oh God.
I think you might have to, just to quell some misconceptions. But that is a topic for another day, for the most part. But I'll talk about their coverage here now. They're fairly multiple. Do have a slight preference for single high coverages, so either cover 3 or cover 1 man. But they will throw all kinds of looks at you in the secondary. Generally, though, if they're blitzing, which is a lot, you're getting 1 high with a lot of free access yards on the table.
And they're weird because they don't play a lot of press man coverage, but they do play a lot of just in general man coverage. And I think that just sort of, they want to blitz a lot. So you do get a lot of those sort of free access yards, especially in the slot. If this team went up against Baylor, oh God, oh Lord. They even had problems with that when they were going up against Cincinnati with the free access yards. But they're going to give you a lot of the shorter stuff, and they're not going to be that great up against the run. However, the running doesn't get more difficult when you're in the red zone because, you're still basically dealing with the same box. That area doesn't necessarily matter as much, at least within like 5 or 10 yards. Whenever you're outside of those contacts, so between the 20s, that is when you give up a lot of those yards because that's the philosophy of the bend, don't break. You don't want to give up the big play, but you also just make sure that once they get between the 20s, they're not going to let them score that often. So that is sort of their defensive philosophy, but their blitzes are what makes that coverage structure passable, at least in the passing game. No pun intended.
Yeah. An area that they've massively improved on from last year is getting pressure. 17 and a half sacks on the year through 7 games, or 2.5 per game, with their defensive line really being a significant reason as to why they're getting all that pressure. A lot of that is because they've gotten better using stunts on the defensive line, which is preventing them from just getting completely stonewalled at the point of attack.
Yeah. And what a lot of people think about stunts is that with stunts, you're either going to get immediate pressure or you're not going to get pressure at all. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's just a matter of just preventing yourself from getting completely stonewalled. So a stunt can be effective even if you don't get a sack, just because, you're giving the quarterback more to think about. So even if it's perfectly picked up, that doesn't mean that the quarterback isn't feeling something weird is going on. Downside, you leave a lot in the way of breaking quarterback contain, which is what happened with Cincinnati with Brendan Sorsby, of all people, who I might be one of the biggest Brendan Sorsby defenders on the planet. And I think that 90% of Cincy's success is due to him. But he's not mobile. He never has been. So that is sort of the problem with their defensive structure and how they stunt. And another part of that is, they are going to blitz a lot.
Yeah, they blitz a ton. Most downs, they're sending 5, which does end up actually causing quite a few headaches in the running game because they pretty much are always surrendering a gap when they're blitzing. So the blitzing, while it's helped them with this quarterback pressure problem, it has only exacerbated the existing run defense problem.
Yeah, and there's nothing really else to add with that. They're going to surrender a gap on just about every single running play, which again just goes to show throwing more bodies at the line of scrimmage does not necessarily make you a better run defense. If that was the case, the Bear defense would have never died.
Oh, the Bear.
Good old Bear defense. But The last little schematic note is they
Yeah.
they rotate.
Yeah. They rotate a lot of bodies on the defensive line, with 9 defensive linemen registering 90 or more snaps on this year. They seem to rotate based on the situation, so passing and rushing, with their pass rush unit being made up of DJ Withers, Tommy Dunn, and Leroy Harris III. They also like to mix in weird fronts with their pass rush, including this double A gap look with nose tackles and wide 9 edge players. So, kind of starting to get into the same category as as their offensive play call strategy, which is, throw something weird at the offense the same way their offense does with the defense, and try and make something happen with it.
Yeah, and for the record, the multiple times that they showed that look, none of it's worked. Like it hasn't worked because that eliminates their biggest strength in the stunts. Like you can't come out in that alignment and stunt properly. It's just not possible. But yeah, it's just weird how they choose to play defense in their front, because in a lot of ways it's hyper aggressive, but it's hyper aggressive in the wrong way. So this is what people who think Joe Klannerman sucks and has always sucked believe his defenses to be. And I think that that's probably the best way that I could explain it to people.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of Joe Klannerman hate that gets around this year, maybe more warranted than others, although there's always been room for criticism, I think, with him, but probably never been as bad as people have thought. But I can take us into the notable defensive players. We'll start with the guy that I just mentioned a few moments ago. That's Leroy Harris III, defensive end. He wears number 33, which I think is a bit of a weird number for a defensive end. I'm not anti-numbers in the 30s for defensive ends. I just think 33 is an odd choice. But is a transfer from Chattanooga, and this year he's kind of been struggling with consistency. But when he flashes, he looks like a top-flight pass rusher. But when he's off, he really completely disappears. His best game was up against Mizzou, where he had multiple sacks and made Bo Pribula's life much more difficult than he was expecting. I then turned around and laid an A against West Virginia and was just okay against Cincinnati and UCF.
Yeah, so very boomer bust, even more so than most pass rushers are. Because when I say boomer bust, I mean he's either a complete game wrecker or a complete non-factor. And he picks weird times to be a game wrecker, because you could make a semi-convincing argument that he was like the lone functioning part of KU's defense up against Mizzou. And then he laid an egg up against West Virginia, of all teams, with their offensive line struggles. And he's just really confusing because he has multiple ways to win, and then he just won't use any of them. So, I mean, obviously, for K-State's perspective, you hope you get the Leroy Harris that isn't a game wrecker. But, I mean, part of you has to think that he's due. On the other hand, I trust John Pastore to at least contain him.
Yeah, especially coming off of a bye week for Pastore, because we aren't getting Fitzpatrick back. Based off what Kleiman said, it doesn't sound like we're going to maybe get him at all, but not too surprising, I suppose, based on where we're starting from. But back to the KU preview for now. Next notable player, Lyric Rawls, as a safety, and he wears number 2. Another familiar name. He's an in-conference transfer from Oklahoma State. And despite his usage at Oklahoma State being mostly as a true strong safety, KU has been using him as more of a defensive chess piece, and that he has an equal amount of snaps in the box as he does as a true free safety. And so as a part of that, he's been definitely their most versatile defensive back. And while he doesn't have any one area that really blows you away on film, other than maybe his tackling and his ability after the catch. He is pretty good at just about everything that he's asked to do for KU.
Yeah. He's massively developed from his time at Oklahoma State because, I mean, the Oklahoma State defensive backfield for a long time was a disaster. But he's developed really well. And, yeah, he's a chess piece for them. And I think that a large part of that has become that you can't really key in on him in the way that you could at Oklahoma State. And he's massively benefited from that because he always had the talent to be a more versatile player than he was being used as. And KU sort of recognized that for him.
Yeah. So I'm speaking of intra-conference transfers. We have another one here for our last notable defensive player, and that's Trey Lathan, linebacker number 4. This time he's out of West Virginia. He's a name, again, some of you will probably recognize, but he fits the mold of a modern Big 12 linebacker. He's a little bit lighter, but much quicker. His primary job is to patrol the middle of the defense while staying disciplined enough to stay in his run fits. And he does a pretty good job at both of those things, but an amazing job, particularly in coverage. This year, he's had 200 coverage snaps and has allowed just 13 catches for 87 yards. And that's with 28 targets. So he's already not being targeted very much, but even when he is, less than 50% catch rate. So pretty good stuff from Trey Lathan. So attacking underneath him, generally not a good idea because he can really disrupt that window alongside the best of them.
Yeah, and Trey Lathan is a pretty good argument for why it takes more than one player to be good in run defense, because in a bubble, he plays the run defense fine. However, everyone else around him, it is truly the group project no one else did any work on. And, defending the run is always going to be a team effort, which is why I'm always extremely skeptical of people who say, this one player is the reason why the run defense is bad, or even this group of players is why the run defense is bad, because typically that's typically a pretty easy thing to diagnose and coach, unless everyone's blowing it at the exact same time, in which case that's a widespread issue. But there are very few. Let me clarify. There are plays where you can definitively pin a long run on one person. There is no run defense in its entirety that you could even pin on one room, I think is the way that I would describe it. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. So I'm going to assume it makes perfect sense to absolutely everyone.
I think that is a fair assumption, because if I get it, I imagine most people do. So,
but all in all, I'm not scared of their defense. Holistically, if I look at this KU team with an objective lens, this current K-State team matches up extremely well with them. And if I hadn't watched, or the first 3 games of the season went 3-4 games of the season went a completely different way for K-State, I would be predicting a blowout. However, I have watched the first few games, and I am waiting for any semblance of that team to show up again. If we get the K-State that showed up against, even Baylor in a game that we lost, if we get that K-State team, I feel like this is going to be not necessarily a comfortable win, because I think it'll be close just by virtue of, I think that now Lance Leipold and Chris Kleiman are allergic to playing blowout games against one another, which is a shame for Kleiman, but sure, whatever. It's nothing takes place in a vacuum. And I know that this KU team is going to want this more than just about anything. because they wanted it really bad last year, and they almost willed themselves to a victory last year and the year before that. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the distractions for KU, because they kind of got humiliated in a public fashion twice over from the same game.
Yeah, I mean, already getting blown out at Tech, which isn't the most embarrassing thing. A blowout's always embarrassing, but I mean, at least Tech is like
Good.
Was the clear, far and away best team in the Big 12. But obviously I was going to say off the field, but it was an object that was dropped on the field, shenanigans that are really kind of the main act in the circus right now for off the field issues for KU. I mean, because it all started because, at least chronologically from how we perceived it, Lance Leipold brought it up to Joey McGuire in their post-game handshake for some reason, because what is Joey McGuire going to do about that in that moment? If you answered absolutely nothing because he has contractual obligations to do press conferences, then that is your answer. You were correct. But he brought that up, and McGuire was not happy. And then it kind of started to make the media rounds. KU put out that like someone threw a pocket knife at them, which is like a crazy thing, like for someone to do. So crazy that it didn't actually happen.
Yes.
And so that happened. Both sides get fined. Tech was just not even related. They just like kind of made it seem like it was. It was just for tortillas and stuff, which they do. But then KU gets fined as well for like intentionally lying, basically.
I think Leipold, in his personal capacity, got fined.
I think he did, and they had him put out a statement, and honestly, their AD put out one of the least coach-friendly like statements that I've seen in a while, like regarding a coach's personal conduct. He basically called Lance a stupid idiot in his Travis Goff, I should say, called him stupid. Travis Goff called Lance Leipold stupid. I should have using pronouns, but and they got fined for that as well. And video leaked out after the world's fastest FOIA request granting by the Texas Tech Athletic Department.
They had that on speed dial.
Yeah, like that was like an hour, and most of the time, like I mean, you find stories where reporters are like, "Yeah, I filed a FOIA request for this like 5 years ago, and they just gave it to me." Like that stuff can take a while because most of the time it's stuff that no one wants to get out of there. But Tech was all over that. The video is admittedly grainy, but if you squint and are biased like we are, then it really gives a certain impression that a member of the KU football staff reached in their pocket and kind of slyly drops a pocket knife on the sideline. You could, I think, in the most generous of interpretations, say that it was an accident. But I think the median interpretation is that it was like him like trying to make it look like he dropped it and like on accident, but it was on purpose. And a player swoops right in, shows it to the coach, and they issue a 15-yard penalty on Texas Tech for it, for like the home crowd throwing stuff on the field. Luckily, we won't have to worry about that because we're at KU, and I imagine that they don't want a 15-yard penalty assessed against themselves. The overarching point of this, though, is that they are kind of acting like a bunch of clowns recently, and I really don't understand the logic behind it. I don't know if it was planned or not, so I'm just not even gonna like insinuate anything about it. Like it looks suspicious, but in all likelihood is probably independent stupidity on the part of all parties.
But you know what it is definitively?
What is that?
Very funny.
It is super funny because it has made KU, well, at least it did make KU last week kind of the laughing stock of the week for college football, which it had been K-State for a decent chunk of the season with us not meeting our expectations. So I'm happy that they elected to take the mantle from us on that, because they didn't have to do that. They chose to do it because they're just good neighbors like that.
Yeah.
But
I also will say that K-State has, they've never been, weirdly enough, K-State has never been the subject of the biggest upset in any given week, which is super weird to say.
Yeah, I mean, the Army game is your best option there, obviously, but Iowa State was not an upset. I mean, it kind of was, but that's a ranked matchup. Arizona, I think you could call an upset, but that's still two teams in the same conference, and it wasn't like a major blowout or anything. And then Baylor, by that point, we'd already been well exposed as fraudulent by the time we got to Baylor. So, if anything, that was almost an upset on our end.
Yeah, it's just funny. But in all seriousness, I do think that this is not the best KU team that K-State has faced in the Kleiman era. In fact, it's probably a distant third. But those other two teams beat us, one of them being in Manhattan. And, they, for what they don't have in strict on the field talent, they have in scheme, and God, do they want to beat us.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing that has been obvious throughout the Leipold era, is that the want-to is definitely super obvious when KU is on the field against K-State. They very, very badly want to get us. I don't blame them, because losing to somebody 16, hopefully 17 times in a row is not a fun experience. We went through that with basketball. I imagine it is less fun even on the sport that most of the country considers to be the biggest college sport. But the last couple years, especially, particularly 2023, KU really broke out all the stops, all the bells and whistles, all the extras. They went all out with a basically entirely new offense installed over the course of 2 weeks. I still, conspiracy theory, I still fully believe they didn't purposefully tank Texas Tech, but without a doubt looked ahead and didn't feel too bad about dropping that game until after they lost to us, because then they lost 2 games for the price of 1. But I still think that they dropped that game because they were looking ahead. But I regardless, am still a bit worried, especially because Jeff Grimes isn't their offensive coordinator anymore.
And they almost beat us with him as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, the stars really aligned last year for KU in Manhattan, and they weren't able to get it done. The same thing happened in Lawrence in 2023, and they weren't able to get it done. Both times it felt like borderline divine intervention that K-State was able to escape with the win. So that leaves me feeling very antsy about this year. 2 times in a row, KU has just about gotten the monkey off their back. They say third time is the charm. We shall see. But I'm definitely worried about the streak, especially with how this team has been playing.
Yeah. With all that being said, I am going to project a K-State victory. If not just for my sanity, but I genuinely believe that if K-State is to lose this game, it will be because they got outcoached. And there's no other path to victory for KU other than outcoaching K-State. And for all of the warts on the season for both Joe Klanderman and Matt Wells, they've at least shown capacity this season to call really, really good games. I don't even think that both of them need to call their best games on the season for K-State to win this game. They just need to not piss themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I'm particularly looking to Joe Klanderman to put together a good game plan for this game. Obviously, Matt Wells needs to as well. But I think KU's offense versus K-State's defense is probably the most important matchup, particularly containing their primary playmakers and Jalen Daniels, LeSean Williams, and Emmanuel Henderson. But that doesn't mean that we can completely take our eyes off of K-State's offense versus KU's defense, because, when you have two decent quality groups like KU's offense, K-State's defense, you have the stoppable force of K-State's offense running the ball versus the movable object of the KU run defense to keep an eye on the other end. Because obviously K-State's not running the ball very well this year, particularly compared to the rest of the Kleiman era. KU is defending the ball even worse, or defending the run, I should say, even worse than they have been recently. And that's with some pretty talented players up front. A few we've already mentioned, but Bengali Kamara is a major one as well that we didn't include in the notable players that has the potential to take over a game if he needs to. So it's gonna be another crazy game. I wish that they wouldn't be crazy though. I'd like to go back to comfortably winning by 4 possessions and being disappointed if we only win by 20. So that's where I want to be in this rivalry, but we just can't have nice things right now. So
no. Anyway, are you projecting a win?
Yeah. If you'd asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have said no and felt really sickly about it. But I think I am today. Just the way the K-State's performed the last 3 games, even with the loss to Baylor, and then also KU's kind of taken a step back as of late. They've definitely shown some vulnerabilities, and like you said, this K-State team does match up really well with them. So I've got K-State winning this one 34-28.
I will say that if KU comes out and has a triple option offense, I'm going to A, be pissed, and B, be extremely worried.
Now you say that, but just wait for the triple quarterback offense, because we've seen dual quarterback. We've run some dual quarterback ourselves, but they're going to break out the vaunted triple quarterback. Or why stop there? Go wishbone or flexbone with a quad QB formation. I'm sure they have a 4th guy outside of Daniels, Ballard, and Marshall that can take some snaps there.
Yeah, that's gross. Anyway, you have any final notes?
Please win.
I agree.
I'll be sad if they don't. Also, K-State not statistically eliminated from the Big 12 championship right now. If they win out and a lot of other stuff happens, they can end up and playing around with a schedule predictor. So if you want to make yourself feel better, that's an option.
Yeah, because this team is beating Texas Tech.
Well,
that would be the most K-State and Texas Tech thing in the world, though.
It really would be all-time Texas Tech season to have the start to the year that they have and then lose out to end the season. I think Cliff Kingsbury might have done that at one point. I think he started 7-0 and lost 5 straight at the end of the year or something like that. Maybe it was the inverse. I can't remember. But that'd be Tech. That would be vintage Tech. It's not my official prediction.
No. My official prediction is we're losing that game, but and we're not even there yet. But anyway, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00.
I'm at Connor Baltzor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're going to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.